Welcome back to U.S. Government Explained, the podcast where we break down how American government works clearly, calmly, and in plain English. I'm your host, Freya. In our last episode, we looked at the judicial branch. Today, we're taking a step back to look at something bigger than just one branch. We're diving more deeply into checks and balances, the system designed to prevent any part of the government from becoming too powerful. Checks and balances are baked into the structure of the U.S. Constitution. The founders had just fought a war to escape the power of a monarch. They were deeply afraid of concentrated political power. So they created 3 separate branches, legislative, executive, and judicial, and made sure each one had specific ways to limit the others, and that they all had to work together. This creates a system that's sometimes slow, sometimes frustrating, but intentionally balanced. Even today, political gridlock, debates, and disagreements are often signs that the system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. No single person or group can act without being held accountable by the others. Let's take a look at legislative checks on the executive. Congress has several powerful tools to limit the president. The first is overriding vetoes. If the president vetoes or says no on a bill, Congress can override that veto with a 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate. A recent example happened in 2021 when Congress overrode President Trump's veto of the National Defense Authorization Act, a major military funding bill. The second power is the power of the purse. Congress controls federal spending. It can block, delay, or shape a president's priorities simply by not approving the funding. In the 1970s, Congress used budget powers to limit how the Vietnam War was funded. The third limit is Senate confirmation. The Senate must approve cabinet secretaries, ambassadors, and federal judges appointed by the president. A famous example is the rejection of Robert Bork in 1987, which reshaped the Supreme Court for decades. The fourth limit is impeachment and removal. The House can impeach the president, and the Senate conducts the trial. Several presidents have been impeached, but none have been removed. Richard Nixon resigned before he likely would have been removed from office. And the fifth limit is oversight and investigations. Congress holds hearings, demands documents, and questions government officials. The Watergate hearings, the 9/11 Commission, and recent tech company investigations are all examples of Congress exercising its oversight authority. Now let's flip it and look at executive checks on the legislative. The president's biggest check is the veto. If the president disagrees with a bill passed by Congress, they can stop it with a single signature or block it with a refusal to sign. Executive orders are another major check. These direct federal agencies on how to enforce laws. For example, President Truman integrated the U.S. military by executive order. And recent administrations, Republican and Democratic, have both used executive actions on immigration, climate policy, and labor rules. The president can call Congress into special session in emergencies, though this is rarely used today. And the vice president breaks Senate ties. A recent example came in 2022 when Vice President Kamala Harris cast tie-breaking votes repeatedly during the evenly divided 50-50 Senate, especially on judicial confirmations and key budget legislation. The courts check the other branches through judicial review, the power to strike down laws or executive actions that violate the Constitution. This authority comes from the 1803 case Marbury v. Madison, and it remains one of the most powerful checks in the entire system. Other examples include Brown v. Board of Education in 1954, which struck down school segregation, or United States v. Nixon, 1974, which forced the president to hand over the Watergate tapes, or Texas v. Johnson in 1989, protecting symbolic speech by making flag burning legal, even when Congress disagreed. And even the courts are not unchecked. Congressional checks on the courts include approving judicial appointments in the Senate, changing the number of federal judges, including Supreme Court justices, something Congress hasn't done since 1869, passing new laws or rewriting old ones after a controversial Supreme Court decision, and importantly, Congress can impeach federal judges. This has happened more than a dozen times in U.S. history, usually for corruption or abuse of power. A judge can be removed the same way a president can: impeachment in the House, conviction, and removal in the Senate. And executive checks on the courts include the president nominates all federal judges, and the executive branch is responsible for enforcing court decisions. A dramatic example comes from the 1830s, when President Andrew Jackson refused to enforce a Supreme Court ruling that protected Cherokee sovereignty, instead directing the military to remove the Cherokee from their homeland, resulting in the Trail of Tears, one of the darkest periods in U.S. history. Checks don't only happen between branches, they also exist within the branches. The best example is bicameralism, meaning the House of Representatives and the Senate must agree on the exact same bill before it becomes law. Many immigration bills, gun policy proposals, and budget plans pass one chamber, but not the other. This structure forces compromise. The executive branch also contains internal checks. Cabinet secretaries help control how policies are carried out. Inspector generals investigate wrongdoing inside federal agencies. And military decisions require communication through the Joint Chiefs, limiting unilateral action. Within the judiciary, the appeal system lets higher courts review the decisions of lower courts. And the principle of precedent, known as stare decisis, provides stability, though the Supreme Court can overturn past decisions when it believes the Constitution demands it. For example, Brown v. Board of Education overturned Plessy v. Ferguson, which enshrined the idea of separate but equal. States can check the federal governments as well by bringing lawsuits. This happens frequently on matters like immigration policies and environmental regulations. At the same time, the federal government checks states through the Supremacy Clause, which ensures federal law is the highest law of the land. But the 10th Amendment also reserves significant powers for states, ensuring a balance between national and local authority. Finally, the public performs one of the most important checks in the entire system. Citizens can vote, contact elected officials, attend town halls, participate in protests, which are constitutional rights, join advocacy groups, or simply raise awareness online and in their communities. Mass movements like the civil rights movement, women's rights activism, the No Kings movement of today, and environmental advocacy have shaped American policy just as powerfully as Congress or the courts. Checks and balances have shaped American history again and again. During the New Deal, the Supreme Court struck down several of President Franklin Roosevelt's early programs, forcing him to revise them. During Watergate, Congress and the courts restrained a president who had abused his power. After 9/11, Congress granted broad national security powers, then later rebalanced the system through reforms like the USA Freedom Act. In every era, checks and balances have helped the United States correct itself, adjust course, and stay within constitutional limits. The U.S. system of checks and balances is not perfect, and it's not always fast, but it is designed to keep power distributed, to force cooperation, and to protect the country from the abuse of authority, no matter who holds office. Thanks for listening to U.S. Government Explained. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow, rate, and share the podcast. Next time, we'll look at another influential piece of the U.S. government, political parties. Until then, I'm Freya. I'll see you next time.